Some of the greatest R&B groups in history didn't end because the music stopped. They ended because one person, one ego, one addiction, one terrible secret pulled everything down with them. And in most cases, the other members did nothing wrong. They just had the misfortune of standing next to someone whose life off stage became impossible to ignore. Today, we are looking at 10 R&B bands and vocal groups from the 60s and 70s whose legacies were forever altered or outright destroyed by one disgraced member. The songs are real, the facts are verified, and the stories are ones you need to hear in full. Number 10, the Isley Brothers, Ronald Isley. The Isley Brothers are one of the longest-running family acts in American music history. Ronald O'Kelly and Rudolph Isley brought their church-raised harmonies out of Cincinnati in the mid-50s, landed a deal with RCA by 1959, and released Shout, a song so durable it still closes out parties 60 years later. By 1973, with younger brothers Ernie and Marvin in the lineup, they released That Lady, a top 5 Billboard hit. They owned their masters. They ran their own label, T-Neck Records. They were one of the most self-sufficient acts in black music. And then lead singer Ronald Isley threw it all away. In 2005, Ronald was convicted on 5 counts of federal tax evasion. Prosecutors revealed he had demanded over $12 million in performance fees paid in cash, deliberately avoiding the IRS. While refusing to pay his taxes, he was buying yachts, Bentleys, and multiple homes. The IRS came and seized everything. He filed for bankruptcy, got discharged, then still failed to file returns for 5 more years. In 2006, Ronald Isley was sentenced to 3 years and 1 month in federal prison. He was 65 years old. A group built across 5 decades ended its story in a federal courtroom because one man decided the law simply did not apply to him. Number 9, The Supremes, Florence Ballard. Before Diana Ross was a solo star, before Berry Gordy put her name above the groups, there was a girl from the Brewster Douglas housing projects in Detroit who built the Supremes from nothing. Her name was Florence Ballard, and she is one of the most heartbreaking figures in all of Motown history. In 1961, it was Florence, not Diana, who picked the name Supremes from a list. Marvin Gaye himself called her, and I quote, a hell of a singer, probably the strongest of the 3 girls. But Gordy chose Diana as the lead voice, and Florence was pushed to the background on every hit she helped create. By 1967, Florence had begun drinking heavily. Depression set in. She missed shows and arrived at performances in no condition to perform. On July 1st, 1967, the day after her 24th birthday, she walked onto the stage at Las Vegas's Flamingo Hotel intoxicated and deliberately pushed her stomach out against her costume in open defiance. Berry Gordy called her the next morning. "You're fired." She received a settlement of $160,000 and was contractually forbidden from telling anyone she had ever been a Supreme. Her solo career collapsed. Her attorney allegedly embezzled her money. By the early 70s, the woman who named the Supremes was on welfare. She died of cardiac arrest on February 22, 1976. She was 32 years old. Listen, 90% of you watching these videos right now ain't subscribed yet. If these stories are blowing your mind, imagine what you're missing. Hit subscribe, turn on that bell, and join the R&B fans who never miss a Groove Lens upload. Number 8. New Edition, Bobby Brown. In 1983, 5 teenagers from the Orchard Park housing projects in Roxbury, Massachusetts, released a debut single that went straight to number 1 on the R&B charts. Candy Girl, Ralph Tresvant, Michael Bivins, Ricky Bell, Ronnie DeVoe, and the youngest, a 15-year-old named Bobby Brown. They were being compared to the Jackson 5, and for a brief electric moment, it looked like they might actually live up to that. But Bobby Brown was always the loose wire. His energy on stage was unlike anything in the group. He was the one the crowd could not take their eyes off, and he knew it.
She walks so fast, she looks so sweet, she makes my heart just skip.
By 1985, tensions had reached a breaking point. Brown was told to leave. He was 16 years old. His solo career launched with My Prerogative in 1988 and made him a star.
I'm the only guy that might be true for my girl, Joy, she don't play.
But behind the success was a man already deep in addiction, cocaine, heroin, crack, tracing it back to childhood trauma he carried for decades. Multiple arrests, DUIs, domestic incidents, court dates. He married Whitney Houston in 1992, and the marriage became one of the most public and painful spirals in music history. Whitney Houston died in 2012. Their daughter, Bobby Christina, died in 2015 under similar circumstances. Brown's son, Bobby Jr., died of a fentanyl overdose in 2020. New Edition was one of the greatest R&B groups ever assembled, and they lost their most electric member to addiction before he was old enough to vote. Number 7, the OJs, Bobby Massey and William Powell. The OJs formed in Canton, Ohio in 1958. Eddie Leverett, Walter Williams, William Powell, Bobby Massey, and Bill Iles. They spent over a decade grinding through regional hits and label changes before Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff signed them to Philadelphia International in 1972. That year, everything changed. Backstabbers became a million seller. Love Train hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. They were finally legends. But before that peak, the group had already been hollowed out. Bill Iles left in 1965. Bobby Massey, one of the original 5, a foundational voice, departed just as the group was about to break through. He left amid creative friction, walking away right before the biggest moment of their career, and leaving the group as a trio going into their most important sessions. Then, in 1975, William Powell was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He had also been struggling with addiction. He was forced to retire from performing while still alive, his bandmates touring without him, and he died on May 26, 1977, at 35 years old. And then, decades later, a darker coda. Frankie Little Jr., the earliest member of the group, was identified in December 2021 as partial human remains found in a garbage bag in Ohio in 1982. Investigators ruled his death a homicide. A founding member of the OJs had been murdered, his remains unidentified for 40 years. Backstabbers warned the world. The world should have been paying closer attention. Number 6, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. Harold Melvin. If You Don't Know Me By Now. One of the greatest R&B ballads ever recorded. That voice, raw, pleading, enormous, belonged to a man named Teddy Pendergrass. But the group's name belonged to someone else entirely. Harold Melvin founded the Blue Notes in Philadelphia in the 1950s. He was the business mind, the front man, the leader. But when Teddy Pendergrass joined as drummer in 1969 and quickly moved to lead vocalist, something happened that Harold had not planned for. Pendergrass didn't just sing, he commanded. If You Don't Know Me By Now in 1972. Wake Up Everybody in 1975. The Love I Lost. Don't Leave Me This Way. Every one of those records became a classic entirely because of Pendergrass, and Harold Melvin could not handle it. Instead of celebrating what they had, he grew controlling. He withheld money. He managed the group's finances in ways the members considered deeply unfair. He refused to acknowledge that his own name had become secondary to the voice singing beside him. By 1976, Pendergrass had enough. He left and immediately went stratospheric as a solo artist. Harold kept the name. He found new singers. He kept touring, but the group never again reached those heights. Harold Melvin died in 1997. He had the name, Teddy had the voice, and when the voice walked out, the name was all that was left. Number 5, the Commodores, Lionel Richie. The Commodores formed at Tuskegee University in Alabama in 1968. William King, Thomas McClary, Walter Orange, Milan Williams, Ronald LePred, and a young man named Lionel Richie. They came up hard, opening for the Jackson 5 on their first major tour. By the late 70s, they were one of the biggest acts in the world. Easy Like Sunday Morning, 3 Times a Lady, Still, Sail On, and Brick House, one of the most recognizable opening bars in recorded music. But every ballad in their catalog was Lionel Richie entirely, and as his songwriting attracted attention from other artists in Hollywood, it became increasingly clear he had a future bigger than the group. He wrote Lady for Kenny Rogers. He co-wrote Endless Love with Diana Ross. He was collaborating on We Are the World. In 1982, Lionel Richie officially left the Commodores. All night long, hello, say you, say me. The solo records were enormous. The Commodores' records that followed were not. The group found new singers, kept performing, kept the name alive, but the commercial engine was gone. The songwriting voice that had powered their entire catalog walked straight into a solo decade that made him one of the best-selling artists of the era. The Commodores weren't ruined by scandal. They were ruined by the ambition of one man who recognized he had outgrown them, acted on it, and left the rest of the group to carry the weight of a name he no longer needed. Number 4, The Temptations, David Ruffin. If you want to understand what David Ruffin meant to the Temptations, just listen to Ain't Too Proud to Beg. That voice, gritty, desperate, enormous, like a man about to lose the only thing he has ever loved. Marvin Gaye once said of Ruffin, "I heard in his voice a strength my own voice lacked." Rolling Stone ranked him among the 100 greatest singers of all time. Ruffin joined the Temptations in 1964, and within a year was singing lead on My Girl, the group's first #1 hit. By 1967, cocaine had entered his life and would never really leave. He began missing rehearsals, missing shows. He demanded the group rename themselves David Ruffin and the Temptations, violating a code the members had agreed to from day one. The final straw came June 22, 1968. The Ruffin skipped a show in Cleveland to attend a performance by his new girlfriend, the daughter of Dean Martin. 5 days later, the other 4 Temptations signed legal documentation. He was officially fired. His response? He showed up at the group's next several shows unannounced, walked onto the stage, took the microphone from his replacement, and sang Ain't Too Proud to Beg, while the crowd went wild. Even this I can stand, 'cause I wanna. He had 2 solo top 10 hits. Then the addiction deepened. Tax evasion, crack cocaine, jail. If I have to sleep. On June 1st, 1991, 2 years after his Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, Ruffin collapsed in a Philadelphia crack house. He was taken to a hospital by limousine and died that same morning. He was 50 years old. Michael Jackson quietly paid for every funeral expense. Aretha Franklin performed, and My Girl played for the last time. So deep in the pit of my heart, and each day. Number 3, Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye Sr. In 1971, Marvin Gaye released one of the most important albums in American music history. What's Going On? Songs about Vietnam, about poverty, about a country consuming itself. Motown didn't want to release it. Berry Gordy reportedly called it the worst thing I've ever heard. Gaye released it anyway. Critics now rank it among the greatest albums ever made. We don't need to escalate. But the man who made it spent his entire life at war with one person above all others, his own father. Marvin Gaye Sr. was a Pentecostal minister, severe, controlling. His son later said, Living with Father was like living with a king, an all-cruel, changeable, and all-powerful king.
Talk to me, honey, so you can see.
Marvin changed the spelling of his last name early in his career, partly to create distance from the man who raised him.
Me with brutality.
By 1983, a sexual healing had won 2 Grammys, but Gaye was unraveling. Cocaine, PCP, paranoia. He moved back into his parents' home in Los Angeles, believing it would help him recover. On April 1st, 1984, one day before his 45th birthday, an argument broke out between his parents over a misplaced insurance document. Marvin intervened. Words escalated. He physically confronted his father. Minutes later, Marvin Gaye Sr. walked into his son's bedroom with a .38 revolver, a gun Marvin himself had given him as a gift, and shot him twice. The first bullet pierced his heart, lung, liver, and kidney. It was fatal. Gaye Sr. walked closer and fired again. Marvin Gaye was pronounced dead at the hospital. His father pleaded no contest to voluntary manslaughter and served no prison time. His brother Frankie said Marvin's last words were, "I got what I wanted. I couldn't do it myself, so I made him do it." Number 2, Sly and the Family Stone. Sly Stone. In 1968, Sly and the Family Stone released a song that felt like the most hopeful thing in American music, Everyday People. It hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, and it meant something because the band that made it was the message. Formed in San Francisco in 1966, the Family Stone was racially integrated and mixed gender at a time when that was nearly unheard of in popular music. Their Woodstock set in 1969 is still considered one of the festival's most electrifying performances. They were, in that moment, the most important band in America. And then Sly Stone destroyed it.
One child grows up to...
After relocating to Los Angeles in late 1969, Sly and several members began heavy use of cocaine and PCP. His personality changed completely. Paranoia set in. He became isolated and unreachable. In 1970 alone, the band canceled 26 of their 80 scheduled concerts. When a show in Chicago's Grant Park was canceled, a riot broke out. Promoters stopped booking them. Those who still did sometimes watched Sly walk off stage before the set was finished. Bassist Larry Graham, the man who essentially invented slap bass, left in 1972. Drummer Greg Errico had already gone. What remained was less a band than a rotating group of people orbiting an increasingly absent center. Their final performance at Radio City Music Hall in January 1975 drew barely a fraction of capacity. They had to pool money to get home. The Family Stone were his siblings, his bandmates, people who helped build something genuinely historic. They were left to watch it unravel from the sidelines. Sly Stone died on June 9th, 2025, at 82 years old. The music remains brilliant. The collapse was entirely self-inflicted. Number 1, the Ike and Tina Turner Review. Cheryl Ike Turner. We are saving the most important story for last, because it's not just about a band that was destroyed. It's about a woman who survived. The Ike and Tina Turner Review was one of the most exciting live acts in the history of American R&B. From their first hit, A Fool in Love in 1960, to the Grammy-winning cover of Proud Mary in 1971, they were undeniable. But Ike Turner, the man who built the Review, produced the records, and put his name above the title, was also the man who beat the woman singing beside him, repeatedly, brutally, for 16 years. Tina Turner documented it herself. He broke her jaw. He used her nose as a punching bag so many times she could taste blood running down her throat while she sang. He poured hot coffee on her face. He burned her. He raped her. He beat her before performances, and she walked on stage anyway. Proud Mary went gold. They won a Grammy. The world saw two people in perfect harmony. Nobody saw what happened before the curtain went up. In July 1976, after being beaten on a flight from Dallas, Tina Turner walked out with 36 cents in her pocket. No manager, no label, no money, no plan. What followed was one of the greatest comebacks in music history. But that is not the point. The point is this: the Ike and Tina Turner Review could have been one of the defining R&B acts of the 20th century. It had the talent, it had the energy, it had the voice. One man made sure it could never reach what it deserved to be, not because the music ran out, but because Ike Turner chose violence over everything else. He died in 2007 from a cocaine overdose. Tina Turner died in May 2023 at 83 in her home in Switzerland, having outlived the man who tried to break her by 16 years.